Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Coffee Talk! So today I want to talk about a subject that I've got about 60 hours of research into this week. I did not produce a video earlier in the week because I was working on this one, and I went 2 days over time on my research on this video and was researching right up until the moment I made the video today. I'm making the video now. And it's because this situation in our world is changing so rapidly that about the time I would be ready to produce a video, something would break in the news or in the information stream that would cause me to have to back up and change and make edits on the fly. And finally today I just bumped up against a hard deadline and like, you're getting this, and just know that by the time you watch this, the situation might have changed. So what are we talking about today? Today we're talking about the Titor timeline going live again. The Titor timeline is live. We're also going to talk about Stanley Kubrick and the movie Dr. Strangelove. And we're going to talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis. What possibly could all three of these things have in common with what's going on in the world today? Well, that's what we're going to discuss on Coffee Talk. Don't forget to support this channel. I do not get money from YouTube. I'm supported by viewers like you. So if you enjoy this, get something from it. If you back what I do and want to support me, that keeps my lights on here so I can continue being chief cook and bottle washer for these videos. And you can find descriptions, a link in the description below. So let's start with the concept of Titor. Now, if you're a fan of the channel, you know that Titor was a mysterious individual who claimed to be a time traveler, and he laid out a future that it looks like we are firmly in line with his predictions. He claimed to be from the future and be talking about his past, but his past fits our present to a T. Now, in the Titor timeline, you have a civil war break out in the United States. The civil war is over an election. The election is contested. The battle lines are drawn, according to Titor, between the rural folks and the urban folks, the big cities and the countryside. And a civil war breaks out, and it looks like the city dwellers are going to get the best of the country folks when, because of other things unrelated that are going on in the world at the time, a nuclear war breaks out that's global. It's worldwide. And the entire East Coast and West Coast major cities, and some of the major cities within the interior of the United States, get annihilated by Russia in a nuclear attack. And Russia gets heavy damage, and China gets heavy damage. And it kind of resets the whole world. And nobody invades the United States post dropping of the bombs because they figured mission accomplished. They didn't have a beef with the country mice that were fighting for their freedom. They had a beef with the urban centers and the corporate, deep state, and corrupt government that was causing problems worldwide, and they dealt with it with a nuclear strike. This starts to look eerily similar to what's going on in the world today. Just to catch you up on some current affairs that you may or may not be aware of, that just since we spoke last, Biden quietly, at first, and then it got leaked, he quietly told the Ukrainians that they were going to be given free rein to, well, mostly some limitations, but they were going to be given the use of long-range rockets. These very precise guided rockets would give them the capability to strike well within Russia, something that the Ukrainians have been wanting to do from the beginning. And the United States has held back on that because in no other conflict, no other proxy war, whether it be in the Middle East, Vietnam, even Korea, there were no strikes outside the theater of operation of the disputed territory. Russia didn't get hit directly during the Vietnam War. China didn't get hit directly during the Korean War. And the United States did not get hit directly during these Middle East wars. It was always through proxy sources. But these weapon systems that the United States have already put into Ukraine, and that Biden gave Ukraine the authority to use against Mother Russia are not the kind of weapons that Ukrainians can operate independently. That these rocket and missile systems, they require U.S. infrastructure to operate. They're not really a standalone unit. They're linked literally to the Pentagon. They're linked literally to American military establishments that have to provide them with the targeting information and the codes and the and program these missiles to function. That the Ukrainians don't have the infrastructure required nor the training required in their armed forces to operate these weapon systems. So these weapon systems that are now actively targeting Russia inside the Russian mainland are being operated by U.S. servicemen. And so Russia has said, leading up to this incident, that if you use American weapons that have to be managed and maintained and operated by American troops to the Ukrainian army, and they use them to hit military or civilian targets within Russia, that we will declare war on the United States and put nuclear war on the table. Basically threatening to nuke the West if we did this. Then when we did it, when it happened, and yes, they hit missile launchers in Russia, they hit critical strategic radar systems in Russia with these American weapon systems over the course of this past week. It's why things have been changing rapidly. A lot of people have been terrified that this is going to result in a direct nuclear or tactical nuclear or even strategic nuclear strike against the West, against Paris, against London, against the NATO headquarters in Brussels, I think, and even the United States, even Washington, D.C., even military bases throughout the world that are manned by U.S. servicemen. And, people like Scott Ritter and Douglas McGregor and a lot of anybody who's, knows what they're talking about have been absolutely terrified that all-out nuclear war is going to occur because of this move. And I'm hearing one comedian talk to another comedian on a political discussion, and one comedian laughs because what's being discussed, and he makes a joke, I'll tell in a minute, but because what's being discussed is the nuclear doctrine of the United States. What is the nuclear doctrine of the United States? And as the expert starts to lay out the standing nuclear doctrine of use of nuclear weapons and the nuclear war strategy for the United States for the past 60 years has been virtually unchanged. When he lays it out, the comedian laughs out loud and says, "You're kidding me. So our nuclear doctrine is basically the script for Dr. Strangelove?" If you've not seen Dr. Strangelove, Dr. Strangelove is a movie that was produced by Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick also gave us Clockwork Orange. He also gave us Eyes Wide Shut, where he gives us a look into the Illuminati weird cult programming and rituals that they do, and their sex rituals and their crazy dress-up parties. And many believe that Stanley Kubrick has been a whistleblower from inside the deep state for his entire career. And I could do a whole video on Stanley Kubrick because, he passed away under mysterious circumstances. Don't. Or don't, depending upon what you prefer. But in the movie Dr. Strangelove, essentially it puts on display the automatic nature of a nuclear response to a nuclear attack. And that our basic nuclear doctrine from day one has been to have a nuclear war, for it to be earth-destroying, and for us to ensure that most of the population of the world gets destroyed, and the largest remaining intact civilization is the U.S. Let me repeat that again. Their idea of winning is destroying all of the world and most of America, just to ensure that the United States is basically the last country standing with any kind of organization and structure. At the very end of Dr. Strangelove, a, a fascist doctor, the Dr. Strangelove, puts forth an idea that they should build underground bunkers and put in them nuclear power that would allow them to stay underground for 100 years, and including crops growing artificially under lights, and livestock being raised and butchered, and that, of course, to make sure the Earth and the United States in particular got repopulated, they'd have to make sure that the occupants of the bunker were 10 women to every man. And the joke in the movie is how I think you've got a great idea there. Like they're all down for that, you know. To forget the Beach Boys, 2 girls for every guy, it's 10 girls for every guy. And that they should fill these underground civilizations with all of the people who could rebuild, all of the architects, all of the trade workers, and that their whole point is to destroy the world, come up from underground in 100 years and take over. And when talking about this, Scott Ritter, a person who, by the way, was going to try to go to Russia to get some kind of discussion started for people to come to their senses about the nuclear war disaster that we're facing potentially, and he was going to speak before arguably the world's largest economic forum of the BRICS nations in St. Petersburg, Russia, and he was going to make a documentary while he was there. And when he went to get on the airplane the other day, this is another piece of news that happened this week. He went to get on the airplane, 2 armed in full battle rattle customs agents met him at the gate, seized his passport, wouldn't explain why, wouldn't identify themselves, wouldn't give his passport back, wouldn't give him a receipt for it, told him he wouldn't be traveling to Russia anytime soon. And when he asked under what authority, they said they were there representing the Department of State, the State Department of the United States government. And the State Department had confiscated his passport, and if he wanted to know why, he needed to reach out to the State Department. And then they escorted him past the security area of the airport and told him to get lost. Judge Napolitano, which is another YouTube character and famous judge out of New York, who was going to go with him on this trip on a later flight. When Scott comes back from as soon as this happens to him at the airport, he calls the judge and says, "Don't bother coming, they're going to confiscate your passport." So we are on the verge of potentially World War III of a nuclear sort. That there are people that are okay with destroying the whole world, going underground and coming back up in 100 years via the Dr. Strangelove script. And they're fine with sacrificing all of us and all of the rest of the world so they can maintain power. And that's been our nuclear doctrine since day one, which leads us to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred in the 1960s when Russia put intermediate ballistic nuclear capable missile launchers in Cuba. Well, what they don't tell you in the history books is they did that because we had put the same sort of ordnance in Turkey within striking distance of Russia. So in response, Russia put missile launchers in Cuba 110 miles off the coast of Florida. And if you want to know that story, a great movie's called 13 Days, where it goes inside the White House of the Kennedy administration and covers the missile crisis of the 1960s, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Shows you how close we came to this automated self-destruct nuclear doctrine being played out. In fact, if it wasn't for Kennedy standing up to the generals, we would have had nuclear war in 1963, and that would have been the end of the world, except for those people living underground that would still be waiting to come up to the glowing surface. This idea that a limited nuclear exchange could occur and not make the planet insufferable for 100 years is Pollyanna, right? It's not realistic. That we have so many nuclear weapons that if they start flying on every continent, if they hit us and we hit them back, it puts us into a nuclear winter that makes nothing able to grow for at least 20 years. that it would be 100 years before you could come back up and have anything up here to look at besides wreck and ruin and death and carcasses. And so this is no little thing. This is the end of the world as we know it if it occurs. And now flash forward to what's happening now. The war in Ukraine is over the fact that the West overturned the government in Ukraine, put a pro-Western president in Ukraine, started a civil war in Ukraine with the eastern half of Ukraine, and then we were intending to put them in NATO and bring these weapons in that could reach into Russia. Then the war happened as the Russians came in to prevent the eastern half of Russia from being decimated in this civil war, eastern half of Ukraine rather, not Russia, the eastern half of Ukraine, to keep it from being devastated in this civil war and everyone killed. They came in their defense, and that's how the Ukraine war got started. And then what did we do? We moved in the very missiles that they were trying to prevent us from moving in, trying to block Ukraine from joining NATO. Now there are NATO weapons, U.S. weapons that can reach into Russia in Ukraine on the border of Russia, and more are on their way. So this is like having the Cuban Missile Crisis in Russia for them. That this is their Cuban Missile Crisis. That's what the Ukraine war is really about. Now, why do I bring up Cuba other than the similarities of that? Is that while we've been waiting for the past week to see Russia's response to us putting these rockets and missiles into Ukraine and giving the Ukrainians the keys to say yes or no on using them, and it was okay for them to use them in Russia, and then it happened. We crossed the red line. We used these, the Ukrainians, with the United States' help, use these missiles to strike missile launchers in Russia and strategic radar facilities inside Russia, which is across the red line. We were waiting to be nuked. At one point, I was watching an interview, and Scott Ritter was saying, literally, I could be mid-sentence and the whole world could explode in a blink, in a flash of an eye. That's how close we are to nuclear war. And so, but the good news is one way to look at it, but it's the next step in what's happening. Russia, okay, has decided that they're not going to just nuke us, and they're not going to declare war. They're just going to escalate up and match our energy. So we put missiles in Ukraine that can hit Russia and are hitting Russia, right? And they intend to do the same thing. Putin announced that he's now going to arm enemies of the West, didn't say which ones, enemies of the West, with missiles that can hit within the Western countries, inside Germany, inside London, inside the United States, inside NATO countries. He's going to arm the enemies of the West with missile technology that they can use to hit us, okay? And then, at the same time he's making this announcement, a military exercise by the Russians is announced in the Caribbean, off the coast of the United States. And now a large armada of Russian warships are steaming straight towards Cuba. And they intend to use Cuba as a base of operation 110 miles off the coast of the United States. I believe the next step in this, and this is a prediction because we're on Coffee Talk, I think Russia intends to put ballistic missiles in Cuba and recreate the Cuban Missile Crisis for the United States, because that's what we're doing to him by putting these missile systems into Ukraine. Ukraine is as close to Russia as Cuba is to Florida, closer even. And so this is the next step in all of this. So that kind of covers the World War III aspect of it, but where are we at on the Civil War aspect? Because remember, Titor said that there was going to be a civil war and a nuclear war happen at the same time. And what blows my mind is how much it looks like that's exactly what we're about to experience. Because the left, under the Biden administration, I won't say Biden because I don't think he's in charge, right? Somebody, whoever's changing his diaper is in charge. And they're going to be, they have been utilizing Lawfare I just saw an MSNBC report with the black lady who has the hairdo of Donald Trump. That's some weird projection. I don't know why she adopted Donald Trump's do, but she's got Donald Trump's hairdo now. And she did a special report where they presented a piece that they called the Trump prison pipeline. And in it, they try to paint a picture of how all of the Trump organization, and by proxy, any Trump supporter, is a criminal, and that how the criminal justice system is taking care of Trump. And they list all of these Trump associates that have been convicted of crimes, who have lost big lawsuits, who have lost their livelihood, who've been forced into bankruptcy, and they show it and present it as if it's justice being done. And they can't really wrap their mind around the idea that a sane, sober, and in the middle individual could watch their same report about justice, the justice system, law and order being, effective in stopping the corruption of these Trumpers, how someone else might sit and look at that as clear and pure evidence of a concerted effort by the left through the legal system in the Department of Justice, in DAs throughout the United States, in dirty judges and rigged trials to ramrod and railroad and jail all of Trump's associates. Rudy Giuliano, Steve Bannon, right? Alex Jones. All of these people have been the victims of this lawfare. Even the chief of staff for Donald Trump, even people inside of his cabinet have been victims of this. Anybody that supports Trump becomes a victim of this lawfare. Tucker Carlson losing his job and having to go independent, right? InfoWars having to be sold off now. And they present this like all of these people are engaged in all these criminal acts. And, the system of justice works. How come it doesn't work against their side? How come there isn't any similar types of prison pipeline behind people who have major accusations against them that predate Trump, like Clinton, like the Bushes, just to pick on both sides, right? Why isn't there some kind of track record of the system working against, why is it only working against Trump followers? So you could sit outside this with any reasonable person and view it if you had no dogs in the fight, and it would be clearly evident that they are using the legal system to come after their political enemies. This is political warfare. It's just the precursor to war. If you recall, when Manafort was arrested at the very beginning of this war against Trump, they got I think Manafort was first. When they took him down, once again, a cabinet member, right? An advisor, a close advisor to Donald Trump. I made a video like 6 years ago that says it was called Political Prosecutions Are a Precursor to Civil War. And everybody thought I was crazy. You think I'm crazy still? After this kangaroo court convicts Donald Trump of 32 felony convictions, and I promise you, if he shows up on July 11th, that dirty judge will put him behind bars, and there he will be for the election process, unable to campaign, unable to debate. Why do you think that suddenly out of nowhere, Biden wants to debate Donald Trump? Because he's sure these debates probably aren't going to happen, right? He's going to be in jail. I think one of them's supposed to happen before the sentencing. So maybe they'll have one debate. I don't know. I bet he finds an excuse not to. Because anyone with half a brain can see that Joe Biden is disoriented. Joe Biden is incapable of answering questions. Joe Biden can't find his way off the stage. Joe Biden keeps falling down, keeps losing his way, keeps breaking off into unrelated stories about his past that have nothing to do with the conversation, losing his way and then coming back not knowing where he was. Right? And this has been going on since before he was president, while he was still running for president. And they are completely aware of his decline. That's starting to come out. They may have no choice but to replace him. He may not be functionable by the time the election comes around. And are we going to have a peaceful transfer of power if they're behaving this way? If they're arresting all of us, if they're kicking our doors in, if they're shooting us in our homes, if they're seizing our businesses and our companies, right? Driving us into bankruptcy, and it's only our side that's getting hammered. Is that how the justice system works? Because your side's perfect. There's nobody over there that's ever done anything wrong. They make crimes where there aren't any. So it's looking more and more like there won't be a peaceful transfer of power. It's just, I got nothing to do with it. I'm completely isolated. I'm a guy that lives in a cabin. Hey, Senate, House, don't subpoena me. I don't know nothing. I'm just really good at guessing what's going to happen next. You don't want to watch a mystery movie with me. You don't want to go to a mystery dinner theater thing with me, right? I'm always like the first person that goes, oh, so-and-so did it with a knife in the kitchen. And, let's watch something else, right? And we're 20 minutes into the movie. I got it figured out. Most of the time I only watch the end just to make sure I was right, and I usually am. I'm very rarely ever throwing a curveball. So I'm just good at guessing, but I don't see the transfer of power being peaceful this time. I really see the Titor timeline rolling out just like he said. A civil war and World War III happening at the same time. I made a video in 2017 by that title. It's one of my higher viewed videos, and it's titled World War III and Civil War Happening Now. And that was like 5-6 years ago I made that video. So I've been predicting this even before I heard of the Titor timeline. And when I discovered Titor, I went, holy crud. I've been saying this for a minute. I've been thinking this for a minute. That their intention is to drag America down and then get us involved in a war with communist China and Russia that we are destined to lose. That we are outnumbered when those two, we could fight China, we can fight Russia, but we can't fight China and Russia without releasing nuclear weapons and going back to the Dr. Strangelove doctrine of we blow up the whole world, save a few thousand people underground, and start over from scratch. That we're the last remaining civilization after a global world war. In the Titor timeline, the interior of the United States in certain places survives the chaos because it was mostly along the coastline. In the Titor timeline, people get more serious about God. They get more involved in their community. We move away from standardized money systems and start using barter and other like cryptocurrencies. He predicted this stuff before it was ever invented. Cryptocurrency, he predicted YouTube. He said that there won't be any TV stations or cable news networks or any kind of cable shows or movies or Oscars or anything anymore after the World War. But regular people, will just put on shows from their living room. Sound familiar? Don't. Sage Wanderer, TV star of the post-apocalyptic world. I hope I survive. We'll see. I don't love or cling to this life, so I'll do the best I can, because mainly I want to see how it all turns out. I want to live as long as I can just to see how the story ends. Kind of like why I watch mystery movies after I've already figured them out. Are we living in Titor's timeline? Is a second round of Cuban Missile Crisis about to hit us? Is that going to be Russia's response? Not a nuclear response, but a tit for tat. You put missiles in Ukraine, we put missiles in Cuba. Right? We arm the Houthis. It's another thing they might be doing. I will say this, that the American idea that Putin is bluffing and Russia will do nothing and we can just keep doing what we're doing and Russia's just going to keep turning the other cheek is, that's a ridiculous idea. They're going to do something, just what is it they're going to do? And will it lead to a nuking of the United States and parts of the rest of the world? And will the country mice from the Titor timeline survive to put their little Christian-based communities into action? Only time will tell. I do know this. I put a lot of research in this week. What's going on is so multifaceted. I can't even explain it all to you in detail in one 30-minute video, and if I did, I'd probably get taken down. But this goes all the way back to Albert Pike's 3 World Wars scenario. That maybe Titor wasn't a time traveler. Maybe he was a whistleblower, because maybe all of this was planned for centuries even. Maybe this is a 300-year plan by the New World Order to roll this out, destroy America, and either take charge of the world or destroy it all in the process, leaving only the underground deep state survivors and their minions to be able to repopulate the earth. It's an evil, evil, evil plan, and it very well might be directly from the halls of hell, authored by Satan himself. But it looks like we're living the Titor timeline. So I will leave you with this piece of advice. Titor said, when going into this future that he knew would occur for us, he advised us to have a firearm, know how to use it, know how to clean it, know how to maintain it. That we should know how to purify water, that we should know basic backwoods sanitation, that we should know medical plants and edible plants, and that we should have basic tools needed for survival, and educate ourselves, because the future that he saw for us was one of uncertainty and potentially a matter of life and death for our nation. And it all stems from a disputed election. Will America still exist after November? Will either side accept the president that the system says is elected? Will both sides think it's rigged, no matter who wins? Will violence occur? Will the American people stand up to this lawfare and the abuse of the criminal justice system against political opponents? Well, we'll drink our coffee. I'll sit in my cabin in the woods and watch the internet as long as it still functions. Can you say EMP? Don't. Didn't even bring that one up. Another favorite of this channel. If you enjoyed this, if you like these videos, if you like my point of view and my odd angles on different things, please make a contribution to the channel financially. My livelihood is paid for by people like you. I don't get money from YouTube. And also give us a thumbs up. Check your subscription. Make sure you're still subscribed. And we'll see you next time on Coffee Talk.